Welcome back, guys, to Mr. Nightshade. In today's video, I am telling, in the dead of night, some sounds aren't just your imagination, some doors don't close on their own, and some people aren't who they appear to be. Tonight, you'll hear 3 true disturbing stories from the Appalachian Mountains. Tales that prove fear isn't always far away. Sometimes it's right beside you. If you enjoy these stories, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. So let's go to the first story. Hello all. Originally, I'm from West Virginia. I moved around between the Appalachian and the Midwest some as a kid. Between the ages of 10 to 13, I lived in rural Kentucky, in the foothills of one of the oldest mountain ranges on the planet. I lived with my dad and my grams. We lived in what we call a holler. Think of it like a cul-de-sac in between a set of foothills. We lived in the middle of the neighborhood with nothing but family on both sides. No one lived across from us or behind us because of the foothills. When I moved in, my grams had some rules I had to follow. At the time, I chalked them up to hillbilly stranger danger. There were things like, don't mess around with the wild animals, don't go out into the woods alone. Then they got a little weird. Don't whistle. If you hear your name, don't answer and don't go to it. And if you see someone in the woods, you might know, no you didn't, and just come home. This experience happened in August when I was 11. My dad and I had a mowed path through the tall grass and berry bushes to the left of the double wide we lived in. We camped out there a lot because it was close enough that we could check on my grams. Now when you're in the woods, things are louder than you think. You have animal life, bugs chattering, wind through the trees and grass. There was a stream that ran along the road you could easily hear. That night we added the campfire to that list. My dad decided to go back up to the house about a quarter mile to get more beer and to check on grams. Before he left, he told me not to mess with the fire. After a few minutes of watching the fire, things started to get quiet. Like real quiet. The wind had all but stopped. Bug and animal sounds were all gone, and the stream sounded like it was miles away. I was getting uncomfortable even though I'd been left at the campground before like this. Then I started to smell and taste it. It was in the back of my throat out of nowhere, this awful metal tang. After a few more moments of dread, my dad came back. He was mad right away, said he could smell burning metal coming up the trail. He accused me of tossing beer cans in the fire. I told him I didn't, and even pointed to the fire to prove it. He said there was a storm coming in, and we needed to get back home, and he let it go. We left the tent and started our way back. Now the very cool but very weird thing about lightning in woods this dense is when the lighting hits, it lights up everything like the middle of the day, well up until the front of the trees. After the first set of trees, it's pitch black. There are no street lights, and unless you have lights on your property, it's completely black. So it's pitch black, lightly raining, and other than the dim lights from the house windows, there's nothing. I'm eating watermelon as one dose in August in the mountains when the first clap of lighting hits. Everything is as bright as it can be. After the second passes, it's black as pitch aging. Next clap of lighting comes, and that's when I kind of see it. On the porch, past the yard, over the stream, past the road, and the ditches on either side just past the first line of trees, I could see the silhouette of it. Then it goes dark. This is also when I can't start to taste that same awful burning metal. I'm not really sure what I saw, so I just kind of stay still. It's a few moments before the lighting hits aging. The figure is now closer, standing side by side to the trees. Then it's back aging. I'm standing now, not sure what to do. It's been 20 years to this day, and I've tried, but could never fully describe what I saw. This thing's head wasn't proportioned to its body. The arms were too long and the torso didn't fit right. It was like if you asked a blind person to draw what a person looked like. It just didn't look correct. Once the lighting hit aging, the thing is standing in the middle of the road. Not wanting to see this thing get any closer, I go inside. My grams is doing dishes and ask why I'm inside. I tell her I think I saw something. She almost immediately gets my dad on his feet, telling him to shut and lock all the windows and doors. My dad, vaguely drunk, obeys. That night I sleep with her. The next day we discover the tent door is torn off. It didn't look like an animal, things weren't cut or shredded, but looked like someone took and pulled it apart. My uncle, who lived a mile or so up, had all 8 chickens killed. Heads gone, no blood. The next few weeks, all the kids had to wait for the bus with an adult. My dad had to be late for work for almost 3 weeks. Anytime I tried to talk about it, I just had the subject change. I just figured I was a kid, and it wasn't important or real. It wasn't until years later I finally understood. I was in my early 20s, and some cousins were in town for Halloween. As I was telling this story, my aunt got irate with me, saying, "Don't you tell them that, don't you put that evil on them." After I couldn't help but think back on all the times I tried to talk about it, and how I was shunned. My kid mind not realizing it wasn't as simple as a subject change, but then actively shushing me. Once I started dipping my toes in Reddit, I realized there was a name for this fucking thing. The same name my auntie had called it that day at the party, and other people have seen it. The Goatman. What bothers me the most is how to this day I couldn't describe any feature, nor have I ever tasted that awful burning metal taste. So friends, if you ever find yourself in the foothills of Kentucky, please remember my Graham's rules. I grew up in southern Appalachia, in western North Carolina, 30 minutes outside of the town of Asheville. The hills and hollers of the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest mountains in the world, with some of the rock formations dating back over 1 billion years. That quite literally means they were here before there were terrestrial animals. As with most things that have been on the earth a long time, there are inexplicable anomalies, both benevolent and malevolent. For example, the brown mountain lights. Never in my life have I felt threatened or uneasy when witnessing them from Wiseman's view. They're neither good nor evil, they just are. On the benevolent side, sometimes when you walk through an abandoned old church up near Mom and Dad's property line, you can feel good, warm and happy energy. It's like that first warm day of summer when the sunshine is not too hot, but it's not cold. Well, this story is not about one such anomaly. It's about something that was definitely malevolent. About a decade ago, I was in night school up at AB Tech, going to school for automotive mechanics. I would go into class at about 2:30 p.m. after I got off my part-time job, and I would end up getting home about 10:30 p.m., depending on traffic. Every night I drove the same road, in my old 1973 W200 Dodge pickup. Some nights it would get rather boring, and I would take a different route, jump off of I-40 and drive the back roads. On this particular evening, I had decided to just stay on I-40 because I just wanted to go home and go to bed. It was Thursday, and there was no class on Friday, and I wanted to get in bed early so I could go out into the woods and go hiking early tomorrow morning and watch the sun come up. As I jumped off of I-40 onto the exit where my parents lived, the night seemed to get darker, and none of the animals that I could hear through my rolled-down windows made any more noise. The cab of my truck became smaller and smaller, and my breathing quickened. I have never faced any kind of anxiety in my life, but at that moment, something felt off and there was no way I could put my finger on what it was. I came to a stop on the exit ramp, turned to go down the road, and I happened to notice that the gas station off the exit where Mom and Dad lived had no lights on. They were a 24-hour truck stop and always had lights on, but I didn't think about it again after noticing. I just chalked it up to the power being out. But I could not shake the feeling that something was definitely askew. I slowly shifted through all of my old truck's gears, not wanting to make any more noise than an old pickup already did. I leaned over my steering wheel to look up at the moon through the windshield, and there were barely any stars visible, which was way out of the ordinary. If you've ever been to Appalachia, primarily the sparsely populated areas where I'm from, you can see the Milky Way on clear nights. An absence of stars back home is only due to cloud cover or whatever in the hell went on this particular night. As I rounded a particularly sharp left-hand curve and chugged through a straight stretch before the next right-hander, I looked at the ancient, decaying barn I always gazed at when riding that stretch of road, and thought about how long that thing had been here, and how many advancements and civilization it had seen. For the split second that my gaze wandered, a very large, sickly-looking dog ran out in front of my truck, no more than 10 feet in front of me. Old Betsy was a good truck, but she didn't stop well. Thump, thump. I heard the fence posts I had left in my truck bounce up out of my bed and then back into it as I slid to a stop. My first thought was, oh God, now I have to go tell these neighbors that I ran over their dog. That shit doesn't go real far with people around here. It can really kind of set them off depending on the dog and the person. As I sat there breathing in the smell of burning rubber, something else found its way into my nose, the stench of rotting flesh. It's not a smell you ever forget once you smell it one time. I didn't pay much attention to it at the time. I just chalked it up to some rotting roadkill nearby. Finally, I thought to myself, let me go check and see who this dog belongs to. I pushed my clutch in, shifted to reverse, and as I looked in my rearview mirror, illuminated by the haunting glow of my reverse lamps, was the same dog. Only it wasn't on 4 legs anymore. It had stood up, like a man well over 10 ft tall. Only then did it dawn on me that the front of my truck was every bit of 5 ft tall, and this dog was every bit of 5 ft tall at the shoulder on all fours. As it turned its head to look in the direction of my truck, I caught only a glimpse of this creature. It was not a dog. It was not a man. It was somewhere in between and at the same time entirely separate altogether. Its skin hung loose off of its emaciated and thin frame, like a raccoon. Bits of matted fur and dirt and mud clung to its legs like a disease. The right arm seemed a little longer than the left, and they both hung abnormally low in relation to either animal this creature seemed to be. As it regained its senses, it turned and looked into the mirror, like it knew exactly where I was sitting. The face was that of a man's, but the very edges of its face seemed to not be totally defined. They seemed to move and change like something you would see at a cellular level in a scientific documentary. There were no eyes, but only sockets where eyes should have been. No hair, and the skin that was dripping off its face was a cold, lifeless gray color. The nose was short and shoved into its face, like a bulldog, but the teeth still haunt me. It was definitely carnivorous, and true to form of the rest of its unnatural look, many of the teeth didn't seem to be arranged in a natural way in its mouth. They seemed to fill and spill forth from the indefinable face, almost like they knew the horror they occupied, and they were searching for a way out. It stared through my life, into my eyes, and past my soul. It seemed like an eternity, but it could not have been more than 5 seconds that I sat there paralyzed. A light came on at the house next to the road, causing the creature to snap its gaze in that direction and tear off into the woods on its back 2 legs like a man. I jammed my old truck in first gear and roasted tires all the way through first, snatched second gear and drove as fast as I could home. When I got to the house, both of my parents were asleep. I went downstairs into my bedroom and loaded every firearm I possessed and locked all of the doors. I couldn't wake them up. Who the fuck would believe that, and at 10:30 on a Thursday night? The basement was eerily quiet that night. Even their dogs that got up to raise hell at outside animals at all hours of the night were dead silent. The old post and beam house didn't even creak or pop that night, as was usual. At about 3 a.m. I started to finally get drowsy, and as I went to lay my head down to get some sleep so I could still attempt to go hiking the next morning, I smelled the stench of death again. It was faint at first, but it was definitely there. I thought to myself, you're just going crazy. None of that shit was real. But as I dwelt on it, it became more and more noticeable until it filled the entire basement. My dad has a home office in the basement with 2 large glass doors that face Pisgah National Forest, an impenetrable 500,000-acre woods. I finally worked up the courage to walk out of my bedroom and into the basement living room with my little tactical 12-gauge, loaded tack light on. I covered the flashlight with my hand so as not to make my presence known until need be, and as I turned right out of the living room into my father's office, I shined the light through the glass doors, and at the edge of the woods, there stood the creature. It was motionless. It stared right into the light, unafraid, with those soulless sockets devoid of eyes. I quickly covered my tactical light, ran into the living room, flipped on the outdoor floodlights. Into my surprise, it was no longer standing at the edge of the woods, but between the house and the edge of the woods, still motionless. I swung the door open and fired every round I had in its direction. I must have scored a couple of hits because it screeched an unearthly scream, like that of a woman being slaughtered as it took off into the woods. The dogs went crazy. Mom and Dad woke up asking me what the hell I was doing. I told them that a bear had gotten into the trash and I was scaring it away. They didn't believe me, but I knew they wouldn't believe the truth either. I didn't sleep that night, or any time until the following Sunday. Everything seemed to return to normal, and I didn't think about the creature again until I met my wife about 6 years later. Her mother's house sits at the mouth of the holler, no more than 4 or 5 miles up the road from my mother and father's. Up on the side of the holler there are kennels for her brother's hunting dogs, no longer in use and haven't been in years, but the fence is still there and the concrete pad is still there. It's a thing of great use when you need to quarantine an animal. Her Great Pyrenees had gotten into a tussle with a raccoon, which of course he destroyed, but his rabies vaccination had lapsed, so we had to keep him quarantined for a time. It didn't bother him. He kind of likes solitude. This particular night that we were coming home from a movie date in a neighboring town was the last night of quarantine for him. So we walked up the trail, using our phone flashlights to get to the kennel, and there he sat, patiently waiting, tail wagging happy to see us. We put him on a leash and started walking back to the house with him. As we were walking back through the darkness, I started to feel the same feeling I had felt the night I hit the creature in my truck. I didn't say anything so as not to alarm my wife, but then the smell came wafting in on the breeze. She jokingly asked me, "My God, what did you eat? You stink." I half-assed laughed, not being able to fully appreciate the joke for the horrors that raged within my mind. She immediately caught on and asked me what was wrong too, which I could only reply, "I'll tell you later." She grew up in the woods and around hunting and things of that nature her whole life, so she knew what I meant. She knew we were being watched by something. When we could see the lights of the house from the trail to the kennel, we heard it. There came barking from the kennel that sounded just like the Great Pyrenees we had on a leash next to us. It was a perfect imitation. The Pyrenees, being a guardian dog, immediately sensed that something was wrong, and so he turned to face the danger, belting out deep barks and growls in that direction. I don't know if you've ever had to drag a 150 lb dog, but it sucks and is no easy task. I'm 6 ft tall and 240 lb, and it was all I could do to get him back to the house. The barking never ceased the entire time we were running towards the house. In fact, it seemed to grow closer and closer until it seemed it was coming from inside my own head. Her mother heard the commotion and flipped the floodlights on as we made it into the fence of the yard, and I caught a glimpse of something coming to a dead stop at the end of where the light reached, wheeling around and tearing off back into the darkness. My wife looks at me and goes, "You want to tell me what the fuck that was?" To which I replied, "Yes, let's go inside." I told her the story, and she listened intently, hanging on every word. Her family came from a long line of granny witches and other supernatural healers of the Appalachians, so her older sister came over the next morning with some herbs and chants to bless the property and to ward off evil. I suggested we go up to the dog kennels and do them as well. When we got to the kennels, they were completely destroyed. The very concrete foundation was cracked, and the chain-link fence was torn off of its posts. The dog houses were destroyed, and the place reeked of the stench that followed the creature. My wife's older sister just went about her business like normal, blessed the place, burnt some herbs, and led us back into the property. When we got in the house, she wheeled about on us suddenly and instructed us very firmly to never go into the woods after dark. Not until this thing left me alone. To make a long story short, my wife joined the military, and she ended up getting stationed in Delaware. Well, as someone who's lived around fairly large mountains and endless wilderness their entire life, Delaware is pretty terrible. At least that was my thought when we first moved into the middle of a 50,000-plus population city. Fortunately, though, it didn't take us long to find a house in a sleepy little community further south. We purchased the house and moved in with haste. We were both very grateful and glad to be out of the city and into a rural setting again. The land in Delaware seems lifeless in comparison to Appalachia. The sparsely populated woods don't possess any energy that goes one way or the other. The ground doesn't seem to be alive like it is in Appalachia. Having not thought about the creature in a long time, I resumed my staying outside after dark and playing with our dogs in our rather large yard that borders a small patch of woods. Well, last night I went outside to play with the dogs, and as dark set in, I built a decent-sized fire in my fire pit and consumed some good old-fashioned Appalachian Mountain cough syrup from a mason jar. And just as the fire was dying down, my American bulldog tore off towards the woods. He has a habit of running off to go on adventures, so my immediate instinct was to chase him down in the yard and tackle him so he could not get away. As I tackled his 110 lb ass to the ground and threw him in a fireman's carry over my shoulders, I heard him begin to bark, only the bark was not coming from him. The only sound coming from him was a deep, rumbling growl, a noise I've never heard him make. It was a threatening noise. Something was definitely wrong, and as I ran with him on my shoulders back to the house, the stench of death again began to fill the air. The two other dogs must have caught wind of what was happening and met me at the back door, which I threw open, slammed shut, locked, and again loaded my firearms. How the hell could this thing have followed us 650 miles up here? As I flipped my floodlights on at the backside of my house, several of the bushes and small trees at the forest's edge were still shaking like something had just run through them. My dogs went crazy all night, barking and howling and attempting to get out the windows. I didn't sleep a bit, and I don't think I will for a while. I know for sure I won't be in the woods after dark ever again in my life, not until this thing is gone. This happened in the summer of 2017. My girlfriend and I are from St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. We both attended university there and decided to take a road trip through the United States to celebrate our graduation. Our destination was Miami, Florida. Her family owns a condo near the beach, so we had a free place to stay. We decided to drive instead of fly because we wanted to see a bit of the country on the way down and visit a few friends. The trip usually takes about 20 to 24 hours by car non-stop, and we were planning on making multiple stops. The first part of the road trip was a wonderful experience. We went shopping in Buffalo, then made our way down to Pittsburgh and managed to catch a Pirates game. However, once we hit West Virginia, things changed. It was nothing but endless wilderness and a few small towns sprinkled in between. We had plans to meet up with some friends for dinner in Charlotte, North Carolina, so we wanted to get through West Virginia ASAP. We only made stops when we absolutely had to. We ended up stopping for gas at a pretty remote spot. My girlfriend and I got out of the car, I started pumping gas, and she went inside to use the washroom and pick up some snacks. My tank was about half full when I heard a voice behind me ask, "You're lost?" I looked behind me and saw a middle-aged white man with long, messy brown hair that reached down to his shoulders, and an unkempt beard with dashes of grays and what looked to be drops of dried-up mucus. His clothes were torn up and dirty, and he smelled like a mixture of beer, sweat, pee, and feces. He was a little overweight but pretty tall. I'm 6'9" and he was about 4 inches taller than me. The teeth he still had left were a yellowish brown. On his right cheek, just under his eye, was a tattoo of some kind of pentagram. I'm pretty into YouTube videos about true crime and cults, so I was able to recognize what it was pretty quickly. He was standing very close to my face, to the point where the smell of his breath was making me dizzy, so I backed up. "No, sir, just passing through," I said nervously. "Not too often we see tourists passing through these parts," he responded. "Where you headed?" As he said this, he moved even closer than he was before. I had my back up against my car, and I couldn't move back any further. I wanted to get away from this guy as quickly as possible, but the car was still filling up with gas, and my girlfriend was still inside the gas station. I didn't want this dude to know where we were really going, so I told him I was visiting family in Kentucky and they were expecting us. After I said this, he cracked a weird half smile, opening his mouth just wide enough for me to get a look at his teeth again. I'll never forget that face. His bloodshot eyes were staring deep into my soul. He let out a weird and sinister laugh. "How lovely," he said. "I'll see you kids around." Then he walked away. I was very relieved that he walked away, but also terrified by his last remarks. I didn't even see him when we pulled up to the gas station, so how did he know I wasn't alone? I figured he must have been watching my girlfriend and I when we arrived. The car was finally filled up, and I saw my girlfriend walking toward the car with bags full of snacks for the road. I noticed the weird guy was still at the gas station. He was a few pumps away from us, leaning up against an old red pickup truck, but to my utter discomfort, he wasn't alone. There were 2 other men and 1 woman with him, making the group 4 in total. The 2 men were just as big as he was, but they had shaved heads. One of them was wearing a dirty white tank top, and the other had no shirt on at all. The woman was shorter, about 5'5". She was very skinny with heavy bags under her eyes and long blonde hair. They all looked like they had been living in the woods for the past 10 years. They were staring and pointing at us, talking amongst themselves. As soon as my girlfriend got to the car, I urgently told her to get in. I'm usually a pretty calm guy, so when my girlfriend noticed I was kind of freaking out, she knew something was up. We quickly entered the car. I locked the doors, and I began hauling ass out of the gas station. As we pulled around their red truck to the exit, I noticed there was another pentagram painted on the hood. I also noticed the skull of a goat or ram on their windshield. The 4 people began getting into their truck as they saw us leaving. I knew they were going to follow us as soon as we left. I explained the situation to my girlfriend as we were speeding away from the gas station. We were zooming down the road, and I looked in my rearview mirror. As I expected, the red truck was right behind us. I sped up even more, and they did too. I made a left, they did too. I made a full U-turn, and they did as well. My girlfriend managed to get reception and dialed 911. We gave the operator our location, and they gave us directions to the nearest police station. The operator also asked for the license plate, but the truck didn't have any. Once we were off the phone with them, my girlfriend stuck her cell phone outside of the window and started pointing to it, letting the creeps know we called the police. They finally got the message and stopped following us. We arrived at the police station and filed a report. We gave them the description of the truck and suspects. The investigator said they would call us if they had any more information. We were extremely shaken, but also relieved. All we wanted to do at that point was get the hell out of West Virginia. We thought we had shaken the group for good, but unfortunately we were wrong. We decided to drive through the night to cover as much ground as possible. The area of Appalachia we were in had no streetlights, and I could only see what my headlights allowed me to see. Everything was fine until I noticed 2 headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but I kept an eye on them. The headlights got closer and closer until they were tailgating us. To my complete shock and horror, it was the same red truck from the gas station. These people had somehow found us again and were right behind us. "It's them," I yelled. My girlfriend began to freak out and dialed 911. I floored the gas pedal, not even knowing what was 10 meters in front of me. All we cared about was escaping. We got a mile up the road until my girlfriend yelled, "Watch out!" There were 3 dead cows blocking the narrow road. I slammed on the brakes. The red truck was right behind us and we couldn't go forward. We knew we fell into a trap. All of a sudden, a naked man wearing a goat mask darted from out of the woods and began hitting our car with what looked like a large axe. The naked man got on the hood of our car and started making sheep noises. My girlfriend was still on the phone with 911, but all she could do was scream. The people behind us got out of the red truck and began walking toward our car. 2 of them had rifles and 1 of them had a large machete. I knew what I had to do. I put the car into reverse and floored it. The naked man fell off our car. We smashed into the truck and I managed to knock it into a ditch. After the truck was out of the way, I pulled the fastest U-turn of my life and we got out of there. The people were yelling all kinds of obscenities at us as we drove away. I drove as fast as I could away from these people until we finally arrived in a town and filed another police report. My girlfriend and I were uninjured, thankfully, but we were extremely traumatized. The car was still drivable after that, so we were able to get the fuck out of West Virginia the next morning. This entire experience made my girlfriend and I scared to do any more road trips. I still call the local police department in West Virginia once in a while to see if they have any leads on these people, but so far, they have not found anything. The fact that these people were able to find us after we went to the police station and drove far away still scares and baffles me to this day. Who knows what kind of sick and twisted things this cult had planned if they managed to catch us. Stay safe out there, everyone.